What's up, Proto? TsucchieKage here, back at it with another Chaos Zero Nightmare video. Now, with the game slowly approaching its 1 month anniversary, I really genuinely thought that making a video like this wasn't necessary anymore. However, with recent conversations and certain things that I've seen in my streams and other people's streams, and if you want to catch me streaming, you can go ahead and follow me on twitch.tv/TsucchieKage. But anyway, I was having certain conversations and noticing how individuals didn't necessarily know which cards would be best or utilized for queues, so I felt it would behoove me to try and assist these individuals. So that's what we're going to do in this video today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce our tiers. Now, our first tier is drawing/milling. If you're unaware of the term of milling, it's basically you try to essentially remove the cards that are at the top of your deck till you can reach whatever card is going to initiate, start your engine, or is your win con. Second tier, I should say, is going to be mitigation/support. These are cards that are going to go on your healers, your controllers, your shielders, and things of that nature, just so that they can, help you survive in your long chaos runs. Damage boost artifacts are self-explanatory. In some way, shape, or form, most of their kit is indicative or tied to you dealing damage or the card itself dealing damage, so that's why it's here. Now, there are certain cards in various tiers that could be in the bottom tier, which is specialist, which is essentially they require a certain build path and a certain synergy for these cards to really excel. In normal gameplay, they're really not used much or looked at outside of maybe Rosaria. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into our first unit, and that unit is going to be the goddess herself. And if you've watched any IMSU video, you already know who this unit is. Nyx. Nyx has the ability to increase your HP and healing percent by 8% on her passive, as well as if the assigned combatant draws a card for the first time of the turn using an ability, then you offer a damage boost of 8% to all of your allies for one turn with a ego skill of 4 cost, where essentially what you'll do is you'll be able to discard up to 3 cards in your hand to draw that same amount of discarded cards. Moving on to the next one, we have Zeta, which is Kalipe's signature card, signature partner, with the passive of Deadly Poison, where essentially she boosts the defense-based damage of Instinct's card by 15%, as well as offering a 25% defense-based damage and shield gain to the assigned combatant's Celestial cards. So if you were able to get Celestial on numerous Kalipe cards, or basically just Vulture Injection, depending on the epiphany that you have, you'll just be getting a plus 25% boost to that, with the ego skill undertaking the mission, which is a 2 cost, where you'll essentially just deal 200% damage and then draw your highest attack card. Again, this is a card that could be in damage boosters and could be in specialists, but if it inherently draws something, guess what? It's a draw support. And speaking of draw support, let's go ahead and move on to the 4-star Rachel, another Vanguard partner with the passive of Replenish Energy, where essentially the assigned combatant's shield gain, depending on manifest investment, will go up from 10 to 20%. And whenever the assigned combatant gains a shield, they have a 20 to 40%, depending on manifestation level, to gain 1% AF counterattack. And her ego skill, surprise, surprise, gives you a shield and lets you draw a card for 2 costs. So that's wonderful. And what is arguably the best card in the game, depending on who you talk to. If you talk to IMSU, he'll fight you between Nyx and Yuri, but he'll always pick Nyx. Yuri's passive, which is cantrip, is essentially she boosts the attack of your combatant, whoever's using her at the time, from 8 to 16%. And upon their first shuffle, which is, I'm assuming, reloading the deck, cycling your hand, the assigned combatant's damage is going to be boosted from a 8 to 16%, depending on manifestation level, with an ego skill cost of 3, which allows you to draw 2. So you're kind of losing, 3 ego skills for 2 cards. But if you're in one of those situations where you just need to pump out the damages and you have 2 attack cards in your hand, that'll do that for you. Here's your girl. Moving on, let's go ahead and talk about the mitigation and support tier. Now, with the mitigation and support tier, we're going to first start off with the what I would say is probably the 3rd best controller partner in the game, Noelle. Now, Noel's ability is Hymn of Blessing, where essentially, depending on how many retain cards are in your hand, you will deal a fixed amount of damage to all of your opponents, as well as an increased percent of damage to your instinct attributes. Now, the other big draw of this card is that whichever retained cards are in the hand of this controller, they'll either get 15% increased damage, shield gain, or healing. So the blanket buff to all of your abilities on top of your potentials is very advantageous. And with a 3-cost ego skill, which I technically don't value as much, which is why she's kind of the 3rd best controller partner on the team. It's going to be Legato of Faith, where you heal by 100%, and then you get to activate all of the remaining effect cards in your hand that have retain on them. Now, Cassius, you can say this is Cassius. You can say this is Nia. This is probably for a unit that's not in the game, because more often than not, you're not building Cassius or Nia with retained cards. But that's neither, there's no point in going too in depth on that. I'll be able to talk more at length about these specific units in a later video. So let's go ahead and move on to the next support, which is a 5-star Vanguard, which is Aishlin, whichever way you want to pronounce that. It sounds like a Gaelic name, who knows. They have the ability of Arcane Wave, where they just increase your health and shield gains by 8%. And whenever your combatant gains a counterattack, then you would gain 15% increased defense damage bonus. Now, you'll read a card like this and you'll be like, oh wow, Kage. If this card is increasing defense-based damage, why is it in mitigation support instead of damage boosters? Well, my young Padawan, let me tell you, it's because her ego skill cost is garbage. Absolutely garbage. You apply 100% shield, and at the end of the turn, you retain 50% of your shields. Nothing about this card outside of that small boost to your counterattacks is damage. And since a lot of individuals aren't building counterattack units, nor are they really pushing content, especially the end game. Well, I wouldn't even necessarily say end game. They're pushing the base in content. Since it has a turn requirement, counterattacks really don't work there. So unfortunate. That's why Aishlin is at the bottom of the Vanguard tier list for me when it comes to these specific partners. Now, arguably one of the best controller cards is going to be the 4-star Alyssa. Now, Alyssa has the ability to boost your defense depending on manifestation level from 12 to 24%. And at the end of battle, she's able to recover your HP from 3 to 6%, which in my opinion makes her a very good controller card when it comes to pushing chaos, since you're constantly moving from battle to battle and you want your support or your controller to stay alive as long as possible. Now, with the added effect of her ego skill, which is essentially you get to heal for 20%. You get to heal for 100% at a 2-cost, and then the healing amount is increased by 50% while in injured state. Now, if you don't know what the injured state is, I'm going to make an assumption here because, they use various different wording and terminologies for the same thing in this game. I'm assuming this is going to be in the mental break status, depending on you or whatever your other combatants. I will have to test this further to see if the while in injured state is for her, or while in injured state is for that specific controller, or it's a holistic buff depending on if your team is injured. And also the second part of this effect, skill I should say, is that you'll gain 1 morale for 1 turn. Whoop-de-freaking-do, a damage boost for 1 turn. Not really that beneficial. Anyway, arguably the best controller card in the game, Arwen, and arguably the worst skill name in the game, Pono Poco's Cheer. But don't worry about it, boys, because it gets worse, because their ego skill is called Poco Po Pon Pon. Yeah, it's crazy. Say all of that 5 times fast and you will lose your brain. Anyway, Arwen's Starshine Intellect, which is their passive skill, is essentially they increase your HP and healing effects from 8 to 12%, depending on manifestation level. And at the start of the turn, you will gain Pono Poco's Cheer. And what's Panapoko's cheer, you may ask, is that you will increase damage. You will reduce the incoming damage from your opponents by 10 to 20%, depending on manifestation level. And upon activation, you get to remove Panapoko's cheer, which is up to 3 stacks. Now, how you activate Panapoko's cheer is, like I was trying to say earlier, is at the start of the turn, you'll gain it equal to the amount of enemies that have attack intention. So if you load into a fight and there are 3 units with swords or cross swords next to their name, guess what? They're gonna hit you. And guess what you're gonna need to do? Arwen-sama. Anyway, Arwen-sama's 3 cost is basically just Poco Po Pon Pon, which is heals you for a 20%. Wow, way better than a 5-star. Am I right? Anyway, it heals you for 200% and applies one of damage reduction to you. So basically, for X amount of hits or how many hits you have associated to you, you'll be able to reduce the damage of those. Now be aware that if the enemy multi-hits you, the first hit will be reduced and the second hit is going to... Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is going to be Wilhelmina, a 4-star Vanguard partner with the passive of Battle Command, which essentially she will boost your combatant's defense from 12 to 24%, depending on manifestation level. And whenever the assigned combatant targets a vulnerable enemy, then you will have 10 to 20% base defense-based damage of all of your attack cards. Secondary effect for this unit is that you will have 1 turn of morale and 1 turn of fortitude. Now, when you look at a card like Wilhelmina, yes, she does give the increased defense, but more often than not, the defense is going to be used for your shielding and not for any damage-based attacks, unless you are running a very specific build, which then moves her into a specialist because you're building a vulnerable counter Magna. That is the only time you will ever use Wilhelmina in a damage boosting specialist set is with Magna, because if you don't have the egos for Magna that allows her counterattacks to proc vulnerable and then have the ego manifestation that makes all of her counterattacks AoE, it really loses its value unless you're in a single target situation. Moving on to the 3-star, this lovely combination carried me through much of the early game, or well, the launch of the game, would be Zatera. It's going to be a 3-star psionic card, which is essentially the assigned combatant's attack is increased from 8 to 16%, depending on manifestation level, and when injured at the end of battle, recover 4 to 8% HP. Now, anytime this card would proc, or any other card would proc, it would always be at the end of the fight, whenever you have less HP. If you're not at max HP, this heals you. So this leads me to believe that the other card that has when injured means that essentially it'll heal you more if you have less HP, which is kind of like... Anywho, Zatera's ego skill is Flower of Memory, which you gain a 200% shield. Oh man, looks exactly why they're in mitigation / support. A artifact that has healing, artifact that has shielding, and a small damage boost. Guess what? That's a support artifact. That's not you could put that under damage boosting, but if it's not outputting just raw damages and the skill is just raw damages, it's not a damage boosting artifact. Anywho, let's go ahead and move on to the last card in the cheer, which is going to be Yvonne. Yvonne has the passive of Bless, where you increase your combatant's defense by 8 to 16%, depending on, manifestation level. And if the combatant ends the turn without using an attack card, you get to heal for 30% at the start of the next turn. Now, this is a controller card, so let's say you are using a controller with little to no attack skills, or you, for whatever reason, decided to get rid of all their attack skills because Rally and Gear back. Anywho, you can then go ahead and move on to the ego skill for Yvonne, which is Consecration, where at a 2 cost, you're able to heal for 100% and then gain 1% Fortitude. Now, what is Fortitude, you may ask? Well, Fortitude is this wonderful little boof that grants you the power of this. For a brief intermission, boys, this next section will talk about our specialists. So our first specialist on the list, which a lot of people have written off, is going to be Marianne. Marianne's passive Eye on the Target is that the assigned combatant's damage to break through enemies is increased by 15%, and that the combatant's basic cards also apply a weak point damage and a 5% weakness damage onto the enemy, including the ego skill of dealing 350% damage. Now, the reason why I say that this is a specialist build, because this I knew that this section was going to take a while because I had to explain this. This card is only used on strikers that either don't have their own way of realistically increasing their damage during the tenacity break section, the breakthrough section, and or they are heavily dependent on their basic cards. So we're gonna go ahead and move over to Priscilla with her passive of Arachnid Domain, where she increases the HP and damage by 8%, and then she also gives you a 25% damage dealt to the combatant when they're targeting someone that's in the break state. So if you provide weakness break on, let me use proper terms so that people don't get confused. When you break a unit's tenacity bar fully, they enter the break state. This card will then boost the damage of your striker when hitting that unit in the break state. Are you seeing a trend here? Are you seeing a trend here? Free to play version for that specific melee, pay to win version for that specific melee. They're specialist cards. You're gonna run them with a team that is performing a bunch of tenacity break, and then you're coming in with your melee and going hoo-hwa. So if you want to run your melee with, I don't know, Kalipe, and she's able to basically with her veil skill remove the tenacity for the units depending on how hard you invest in the specific card, melee can then pop off. But honestly, it's just utilized for Selena. Selena has the passive weakness, she has the breaking, she has the mark damage. It's all for specific build styles. So if that's something that you are interested in, go ahead and give it a try. Next off is going to be Solia. Solia is going to be a 5-star ranger with the passive of Space-Time Warp, which increases the extra attack damage of the combatant by 20%. And when the combatant draws for the first time using an ability, they get a 10% attack card damage boost for 1 turn. And the secondary effect, their ego skill, is that they're able to deal 250% damage and apply marked for 1 turn. Now you look at a card like Solia and you think to yourself, okay, Ranger, extra attack damage, boosting to attack cards, unit that can draw. What unit in the game can currently use this? Well, there's only one, technically. There's only one. And that's Rinoa, because Rinoa has cards in her deck, again, free to play option for Rinoa. She has cards in her deck. She has cards in her deck that deal extra attack damage. She has cards in her deck that draw. Whoop-de friggin' do for her. But a lot of times with this specific card for Rinoa, you're only using it for a specific build for her, which in my opinion would be the cantrip build, where essentially you are stacking your deck with a whole bunch of draw cards, or you're getting the specific epiphany for the flower that allows you to draw cards depending, from your draw pile. But anyway, with that being said, this is why she is in the specialist category, since she's not necessarily what I would call an all-rounder. She's just a very nice card. She's not a busted card, but she's good. Now, Rosaria, she is a 4-star ranger. Now, with Rosaria, if you do not put this on your Selena, if you do not put this on your Veronica, you are throwing. And why do I say that? Is because the assigned combatant's additional damage is increased by 10 to 20%. The secondary effect of financial support, which is her passive, is that when the assigned combatant uses an upgrade or skill card, they then have a 20 to 50% chance to increase morale or gain morale for 1 turn. Moving on to the next card, which is going to be Daisy. Now, I have had limited, and I say limited, I mean literally none outside of the CBT when it comes to testing Daisy. But her passive is Dowsing, and essentially she is another additional attack damage increase. Who would have guessed? Selena support, where you deal either 10 to 20% additional attack damage, and then when the combatant draws for the first time each turn using an ability. Oh, I'm so sorry. Veronica support. Whoa. When the assigned combatant draws for the first time each turn using an ability, there's a 20 or 40% chance to gain morale. Now again, you're seeing a pattern here. You're seeing the pattern here. They're boosting only specific damage. So if you look at Daisy and Rosaria, they're only boosting a specific set of damage, and their morale or their damage increase isn't guaranteed. It's always, you know, a luck of a draw, a coin flip. And then their secondary effect, commencing detection. Commencing detection is that you basically gain 180% shield, and then you gain 1 morale for 1 turn. Going on to the final unit in this list, final partner in this list is going to be the 3-star Vanguard card, Rydell. Has the ability of increasing the max HP of the combatant from 8 to 16%. And if the combatant is in a counterattack stance, then they will deal... their defense-based damage increased from 8 to 16% as well. And guess what? You know what actually makes this so nice is that if you utilize Rydell's skill, Analyze Weakness, you gain shield and counterattack. You know who that works for? Anyway, none of these units are good when you try to build them on counterattack for like endgame content. But if you're in chaos and you just want to, you know, counterattack someone to death, hey, build path. Alrighty, now the big kahuna right here, damage boosters. We are going to have to rapid fire through these bad boys because this video is getting long already. So the first one we're going to talk about is Antia with her passive of Clairvoyance, where she increases the HP and damage by 8%, and then whenever the combatant generates a card, you get an 8% attack damage boost for 1 turn, as well as the passive where you deal 180% damage to all enemies and deal 1% vulnerable. Now, since this is a 5-star psionic card, you're primarily going to want to run this on the only 2 psionic users in the game that generate cards, which is Kairon and Tressa. Moving on to the next one, we have Bria. Bria is another 5-star psionic card with the passive of Check the Instructions, where essentially whenever the combatant generates a card, the attack card damage is increased by 10% for 1 turn, which stacks up to 3 times. And the assigned combatant generates a status ailment card for the first time. You will then have a 20% attack damage boost for 1 turn. With the Ego skill of Capable Secretary, which is a 3 cost, essentially from the discard pile, you're able to exhaust all status ailment cards, including curse cards. And for each exhausted card, you get a 10% damage bonus to that specific combatant for 1 turn. Next thing, because I just realized that I spent a whole time yapping, is Scarlet, Maylin's best friend, the Path of Mastery. If this card is used immediately before the assigned combatants, the assigned combatant will get a 15% attack card bonus, which stacks up to 2 times, and is removed if another combatant's card is used. So not only Maylin, but also Ren, if you look at it at that point. Now, when the combatant uses 2 or more cards, they gain focus. Now, what is focus, you ask? Well, focus is essentially the attack card damage of the assigned combatant is increased by 20%, and you remove focus when another combatant's card is used. So remember, this is not just another attack card, it's any other card used by another person. So this is kind of the card that you want to use right before you start your Maylin combo. You want to make sure that all of your other units, either their 0 cost or their 1 costs, are used to then boost your damage for your Maylin. And then you use Flaming Dragon, you draw and or create your strike poses, and then you blam. Now with the Ego skill Binding Knot, you will deal 250% damage, and then you'll add plus 15 assigned combatant's card damage for each buff that's owned. So if you're well aware of Asteria, which is Haru's signature card, depending on how many buffs that you have, Haru's signature, Haru's Ego skill, where essentially if you have a certain amount of buffs up to a max of 10, you get an increased damage bonus. Well, guess what, guys? Haru's Ego skill is capped, Scarlet is not. Moving on. Moving on, we're gonna go to our good girl, West Makut, the newest addition to the game, which is Yuki's partner, and their passive Gleaming Deduction, where essentially that all attack cards of the assigned combatants drawn by their ability gain a 25% damage boost for 1 turn. So if any card that you utilize that you pull to your hand due to a card's ability, they will get this extra damage bonus, and they get an extra 10% if the card has inspiration. Ego skill, we all know how the skill is. It's a 3 cost, clue spotted. You move 1 card from your hand to the draw pile, and then you get to draw one of the combatant's cards. So let's say you brick your hand. You have absolutely no Yuki cards, and you need to kill the boss, so the boss is going to 4-tap you. Or let's say it's the start of the turn. Your other 2 supporters have massive ego recovery, so you're able to use this immediately. Guess what? This helps you with cycling your hand, because if you draw one of Yuki's cards and you really want to activate it on that turn, but you drew it naturally on the first, you pop this, you select her card, you send it back, it draws that exact same card with its inspiration effect, proccing the partner's passive, boosting her damage. Wow. Almost like this is the damage booster tier. Next card is my absolute favorite, not because, you know, she's a sister, but because she's just a damn good card, which is going to be Janet, the lovely 5-star stat stick with the passive Understanding and Ideals, where she increases your crit chance by 9% for attack cards that cost 1 or less. So this helps supplement certain builds, especially for units like Luke. This is what I would call Luke's favorite card. I did at one point in time say that this card was fantastic when it came to Renoa. However, since you want to use bullet cards for the secondary effect, so when her secondary effect is that when the 5 bullet cards are used, you then generate another handgun bullet in your hand, and all your generated cards have 50% extra damage. Since Renoa doesn't necessarily want to proc and exhaust her dirge bullets and wants to discard them for other cards' effect, this card kind of loses value to me. And with the ego skill of Ultimate Missile turn, you're able to deal 150% damage to all enemies for 1 turn, and then 20%. Then for 1 turn, you're going to give 20% of your bullets damage for that specific combatant, which is huge. You know, we all love a damage booster. Next card is going to be Renoa's signature Kiara with this passive Analyze Weakness. If you have 10 or more cards in the graveyard, then they get a 50% damage boost, and then when the combatant discards a card from whatever her various abilities, then your attack cards will get a 25% damage boost as well. With her 3 costs of you deal 200% damage, and then you add 20% damage by the number of cards in the graveyard. So if you have 10 cards in the graveyard, well, guess what? Double the damages. Moving on to the next one is something that doesn't need any introduction, but it will. Anyway, Asteria, which is Haru's signature. The assigned combatant's card with 2 or less deal 20% more damage, and you also deal 10% more pulverized damage to all of your cards that actually have the pulverized affix. With what I was speaking about earlier, well, not earlier, but with Asteria, this kind of pairs into her kit, where essentially the card will get 20% damage to the next card for the total of cards that are in your hand, max of 20. So let's say you have, if you're running Haru with Kalipe and you have 2 to 3 2-cost cards, well, you're already nearly there, brother. Just pop it, rip it, and dip it. Next,
what did he say?
4-star, the illustrious Ritochka. Utochka has the ability of construction support, where the assigned combatant's card that costs 2 or less deal 10 to 20% damage, and at the start of the turn, they then gain 5 to 10% damage for every point total, every point of the total cost of the attack card. So, let's say the card is a 2-cost. Cards gets a boost, but this is also a free-to-play version for Haru. So let's say you run a non-standard Haru. You want to use her anchor ability, that the retain card, that grants increased damage to your anchor shot but increases the stats of 3. If you use that on the previous turn, wait till your next turn and have her Tochka proc. And with her ego skill of Workplace Hazards, it's a 2-cost where for 1 turn this unit will gain 3 morale. Moving on to the lovely and illustrious Erica. Erica is a 5-star Vanguard card with the ability of no speeding, where she increases your counterattack damage by 15%, and whenever the assigned combatant uses a skill upgrade card, there's a 15% to gain counterattack yet again. Now, I wonder who... We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that bit again. She deals 200% defense-based damage to all enemies, and then she gains 1 counterattack if a enemy's anticipated action is attacked. So it's nice. You know, for a 2 cost, you do 200% defense base damage. You gain counterattack, and if any of your, enemies are going to attack you, guess what? You gain another counterattack. So her stocks are rise. I said I wasn't gonna do that bit again. I'm sorry. Moving on. We have Marin. Marin is a 5-star ranger with the effect that she increases extra attack damage of cards from the combatant's abilities by 15%, and then whenever the combatant uses a skill card, they will then gain an extra 20% damage for 1 turn. This is a secondary and kind of a lesser buff or lesser card that you can utilize.
Veronica or Selena?
The ability of Azure Fury, where you can draw 1 card, well, one of your skill cards, after dealing 200% damage to all enemies. And guess what, boys? With the release of the newest seasonal content, this has a lot of cards, well, a lot of equipment and a lot of upgrades that are boosting drawing. And with this card, this offers a wonderful different build path.
Or Veronica or Selena?
Moving on to what I feel is the best hunter card in the game. You will never be able to convince me otherwise. I will literally, once I buy the battle pass, this will be the first thing I get. Setathea, my favorite freaking card in the game. Setathea increases the crit chance of all of your combatants' cards by 8%. Now, when you see certain cards that do this, they have a specific requirement. They have to be created cards, or they have to be cards that have a 1 cost, or cards that are a 2 cost, or they have to be cards that have extra damage or additional damage. Serathea is a blanket hunter buff of 8% crit to all of your cards. And when the assigned combatant's cards result in a critical hit, guess what? You get 3% critical damage, which stacks up to 5 times. So, Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt, 50% damage bonus. Flat for the rest of the fight. The moment you get it stacked up with the ego cost of a 3 cost, which is kind of whatever, dealing 200% damage, and then you apply it vulnerable for 2 turns. Setathea is a stat stick. If you played Genshin Impact, then you know let's say all the way up until Fontaine, a lot of people were using the Black Myth series. They were using the sword that gave you crit chance. They were using the spear, the black polearm that gave you crit chance. That's what Serathea is. She's just a boost to your damage. Moving on. Tina, 5-star ranger support. Now, order attributes extra damage increased by 15%. 25% extra damage from targeting attack cards. Now, you'll look at this and say, oh my god, this is Hugo support. Then you go to, there's ego skill, draw 1 card, increase the combatant's extra attack damage by 30% for 1 turn. Oh my god, Hugo support. If you're using a Hugo primarily to assist you with drawing, you want Celia. If you're using main DPS Hugo, which not a lot of people are doing, then you'll use Tina. You're using Hugo as a sub for Tressa.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the?
Next up is going to be Akkad. Now, Akkad is going to be a 4-star hunter. This is just a budget. I could say it's a budget Kiara, a budget Janet, but it's a budget Serathea. Essentially, your combatant's cards, depending on the manifestation, if they're bullet cards, they will go up from 10 to 20%, and whenever the combatant lands their first critical hit, their bullet damage will increase from 12 to 24% for 1 turn. Now, I still need to check and test to see if this procs on Renoa's Dirge Bullet at the end of the turn, if that boosts that damage, or if it only boosts the first section of the text. If it only boosts the initial damage used if the card is used on that turn. If that's the case, this is a Luke card, but since I don't have Luke, I can't test to see. Next is the skill, what I wish to protect, where exactly for 1 turn, you'll increase the 25%, you'll increase the crit chance of the unit by 25% for all of their designated attack cards. So, again, just another useful stat stick. but the damage on the back end, which is why when I did my Renoa video, I kind of had a COD not at the best. I mean, a COD was above character. Next up, the best striker 4-star in the game, Lillian. Lillian has the partner passive of Poltergeist, where essentially any and all of your cards that cost 1 or less have an increased damage of 10 to 20%, and whenever you utilize a skill, you get another 10 to 20% attack card damage for 1 turn, and it stacks 3 times. So this is primarily a very selfish build for units like Mei Lin, units like Rin, units like Yuki. Now, when I say Yuki, I genuinely mean Yuki. Now, the ability of Lillian is Light of Judgment. You deal damage to all enemies. Oh god, Yuki. Anyway, you deal 100% damage to all enemies, and then you draw 1 attack card from the assigned combatant's cards that are less than or equal to 1. Oh yeah, if you don't have Westmacott, slap Lillian on Yuki, on your Mei Lin, or your Rin, and go. Next up is a card that I kind of wrote off as being mid, but after looking at it more, this is a very good free-to-play, well, let's not say free-to-play, this is a very good low investment card for Luke, because at the start of the turn, the damage of 1 attack card is increased by 10 to 20% for the combatant, and, for Luke. And when the combatant generates a card for the first time, their attack card damage is increased by 10 to 20% for 1 turn. Since Luke genuinely wants to generate his bullet cards and then use him, this card is very beneficial, as well as their 2-cost effect that for 1 turn increase the damage of cards generated by the assigned combatant's ability by 20%. Huge. Don't put this on Renoa. Renoa does not proc these things, and until I have able to build up these cards to a usable, serviceable level, and then test to see if there is a damage increase, I would say for the time being, just use this on Luke. If you yourself, as the player, want to try to test this out on your Renoa, by all means, and you can sound off on if it works or not in the comment section down below. Last but certainly not least, so we're gonna fly through this, is Douglas. Douglas increases your attack by 8 to 16% since he is a striker, and the damage at the start of the battle, the damage dealt by your cards is increased for 1 turn from 8 to 16%, with a giant bazooka skill that essentially just hits everybody for a base 120. Not really much to write home about. It's a little boost at the start of the battle, and then you get a little 16%. I mean, we can't thumb our nose at a little 16%. Next card is going to be Nakia. Nakia's passive, Hot-Blooded Soldier. You will increase the combatant's attack just like Douglas from 8 to 16%, but you have the extra effect is that whenever an ally defeats an enemy, you gain 1 stack of backline support. And backline support is, depending on investment, 10 to 20% damage for 1 attack card. And upon activating backline support, upon activation, backline support is reduced by 1 for up to 3 stacks. So if you are unaware, if you're in a fight where the boss summons multiple mobs and you clap through them like Cantress, this card does have some viability in the early game, but it falls off to better cards later. And last but certainly not least, when it comes to our lovely damage boosting cards, is going to be Eloise. Eloise is a psionic 4-star with the passive of technical support, where they increase your attack card damage from 10 to 20% depending on manifestation level. And when the combatant first exhausts a card or first gains a status ailment card, the attack damage is then increased by 12 to 24% for 1 turn, with the added cost, or the skill of 3 costs, is that for 1 turn when a card is exhausted, you apply a weaken to 1 enemy. So if you proc this at the beginning of your turn, this is basically a setup card. You proc this at the beginning of your turn, it then allows your Tressa or your Kairon to then pop off heavily, since they do perform a bunch of exhaustions at the end of the turn. Primarily, I used Eloise before Kairon was nerfed as a nuke, because Brand of Annihilation hits like a truck. But YouTube, this video has already reached 43 minutes. I am so sorry. I love you all. Thank you all for being here. If you stayed to this part of the video, I appreciate you so much. Hopefully you have a great rest of your day, rest of your week. If you need anything else, feel free to hit me up on Discord. That will be in the link description, in the description below. As well as come check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/TsucchieKage. I would greatly appreciate a like, a comment. Feedback is very good for smaller content creators like me. Tell me how you like the format, what you like me to change. Is it too long? Is it too short? Would you rather see other things when it comes to showcasing these units? Let me know all of that and more down in the comments. And I will catch you all in the next video. See you, boys.